This episode of the Commercial Real Estate Investor Podcast is brought to you by Hamilton, a value-add investment and development firm in Nashville, Tennessee, focused on bringing passive real estate investment opportunities directly to your inbox. Visit www.investwithhamilton.com/invest to sign up for upcoming investment opportunities. Welcome back. It's another Tuesday, another live podcast episode here from Cobble Studios in my office. Got a really fun one for you today. Going to be talking about red flags in commercial real estate deals, when to walk away, even though you've got a deal under contract, even though you've spent money on due diligence. Sometimes walking away from a bad deal is better than getting into the deal at all. So in addition to being an investor and developer, some of y'all may know that I also help broker mostly triple net and single tenant net lease investments across the country. And one of our clients was recently under contract on a industrial property in the Midwest, and a bunch of red flags came up. Now, I will caveat this with all of these red flags individually are not necessarily a reason for you to walk away from a deal. In fact, a lot of these red flags could be seen as a good opportunity for you to renegotiate with a seller, or maybe you're going to find something that other buyers may not necessarily have seen, right? We'll be talking about some rent roll discrepancies, right? That can scare a lot of people away, especially if you have never dealt with, the leases versus the rent roll versus cash collected. But it could be an opportunity. Maybe you're going to find something that the seller themselves even missed. But this one is a bit of a mess. So if you're joining us live, feel free to jump in the live chat with the comments if I'm not able to get to it, or if you're listening on the podcast at a later date, come join us live. Typically, we're doing these on Tuesday afternoons. I'm scheduling them on YouTube so that everybody can see that, but I don't always have time to schedule these out in advance. I'm trying to get better about that. I know, guys, I'm working on it. But anyway, let's jump into red flag number one on this deal. I'm going to walk through the red flags that we found on this deal and then some other red flags that we have seen in other opportunities. The sales broker, so the sales rep, leasing agent, or not leasing agent, the sales rep broker, right? They're representing the property. They're representing the seller. They're basically the opposing team, right? I mean, they're trying to help you get the deal done as well, but they have different goals in mind and different needs. The sales broker pushing to use their vendors unreasonably so, right? I mean, there is a such thing as a sales rep broker, or just a broker in general, saying, hey, I would recommend you use this group, call this bank, call this title agency, call this commercial attorney, because I know that they can help you get the deal done. Now, in this deal, we had a commercial real estate broker that was unbelievably pushing hard for us to use their in-house lending broker, right? So this was a shop that happened to have a loan rep within their company. And I would imagine that they get, the sales broker probably gets a kickback, and of course his buddy gets to get paid on placing that debt. Yosef, what's going on, man? How you doing? Thanks for joining us live. So this rep was just really pushing so hard to the point where they didn't believe that we had a term sheet from our lender, who we were already talking to. My client had a mortgage broker already that we were working with, and we said, yeah, we're happy to talk to your guy, but we've already got a guy, and we're shopping around as well. So he started calling our lender, trying to verify the term sheet. Never had this happen before. Big red flag to me. And it wasn't like a single call or a single email, or he didn't send an email and copy my client and I on it. He was blowing this guy's phone up like every hour, probably made 7 or 8 phone calls to the lender trying to get a hold of him to verify this term sheet. And this was within a 48-hour period. Again, that's just not typical. You shouldn't experience anything like that. when you're going through this process. Yes, do the brokers want to know that you have debt and lending secured on an investment? Of course, especially when we're on a shorter timeline. That is typical. What is not typical is calling around the buyer's agent and trying to confirm that after we've provided confirmation that we have a lending term sheet. So if a sales rep starts to push, use our lender, use our title company, and they're doing so, use our inspection team, and they're doing so just in a very pushy way, to me, it's something smells off. Time to start, looking into it a little bit further and figuring out what their motivations might be. We also scheduled physical inspections on this property a week in advance. And the broker texted me 2 days before asking us to push it back a day. We said, no, we can't do that. We notified you a week ago that we were going to be on site for physical inspections. And we've already coordinated with our HVAC technician. We've coordinated with our inspection team. My client was going to be on site looking at the property as well. And it's just not easy to go and reschedule everybody 2 days in advance. Well, they didn't like that. They wanted the owner to be on site, and they kept trying to cancel our inspections. And, it's one thing if you've got a 90-day due diligence period to move it a day or 2 days or a week and be flexible. But after we scheduled it in advance and we had, I want to say 20 or 21 days of inspection, I'd have to go back and look. I can't remember. That's not very much time. And that starts to really, every single day adds up and is very important, especially when you're trying to figure out if the property is in good enough condition. Well, they then said, okay, that's fine. You can go do physical inspections, but you cannot talk to any of the tenants. Again, not a red flag on its own. Looking back, hindsight 2020, huge red flag. They did not want us talking to the tenants whatsoever. Typically, you don't have conversations with the tenants as a buyer until, the week before closing or, when you get close to closing so that so that the sellers know that you're not going to go in there and disrupt the whole pattern and then not close on the property and cause issues for them down the road. Totally fair, right? And that's a very reasonable request. That's why you get estoppels on any asset that you're buying. The estoppel is a document that the tenant and the seller will sign stating this is the lease that is, in place on the property. You'd be amazed at how many times a tenant has a totally different lease than what the seller has given you. Usually it's because there are multiple different leases that they've negotiated throughout the years, and it's not a nefarious issue. But sometimes, some sellers are just trying to be sneaky and get things past you, which I don't always appreciate. When my client showed up on site to do the inspections, they would not let them into the tenant spaces. Big red flag. Why won't you we scheduled physical inspections for this day. You won't let us in the building. So we get to look at the exterior of the building. Well, I didn't have to schedule that with you to get inside. We could have just driven past and done that. So we got to look at the HVAC units, the roof, the exterior facade, and they tried to get us to just use the photos in the listing as evidence of what the interior looked like. I texted my client. I said, we're not doing that. We're not taking their word for what the condition of this space is. Tenants may be responsible for it on a net lease basis, but you have no idea what is going on inside those spaces. They could have taken the pictures 2 years ago, and the tenants have since torn everything up. Hey, Joseph, what's going on? You're asking, what other due diligence am I doing? I've got a couple of videos on commercial real estate due diligence. I've actually got one that will link you to a commercial real estate due diligence checklist, but I'll try and get back to that towards the end and walk through a little more of the types of due diligence or the actions that we're taking whenever we go under contract on a property. So anyway, they're not letting us get inside these spaces after trying to, making sure that we do not talk to the tenants, and then they won't reschedule that for 2 to 3 days, and that's not going to fly with us. So already we're feeling a little weird. They've been overly pushy with their lending, and they totally botched the physical inspections, which usually that goes very smoothly, very quickly. You don't talk to the tenants. Sometimes we'll even say, oh, we're with the new insurance company and we're just coming through and inspecting the property. That way the tenants don't know. Because again, to be fair, from the seller's perspective, you don't want your tenants finding out the building is for sale or may be sold, because sometimes tenants freak out about that and think, oh, well, I'm going to get kicked out because the building's being sold. Well, no, you've got a lease. You're totally fine. We're not trying to get rid of you. In fact, we're buying your income. So, just roll with it. Stick with us. This was another one. So again, we're on a very, very short due diligence period. And after botching the physical inspections, and which ended up, adding another 4 or 5 days onto our time, we went back and we said, hey, look, we need another 2 days added on to the due diligence period to make sure that we are able to get all of our ducks in a row to figure everything out, since you guys ended up pushing our inspections back. Flat out refused the request and would not work with us to extend the due diligence period. We're talking 2 days. It's not like my client and I came back and asked for a 30-day extension. It's just, no, we just need to make sure that we understand what we are buying before any money goes hard because of what's going on. We haven't even seen the inside. And the seller was not willing to budge at all. At all. This seller must not be easy to work with, because the deal had fallen out of contract the week before we put it under contract, which makes me think maybe the previous buyer found out a couple of the same things that we're starting to see in this process. After that, we had a refusal to share some due diligence materials. In the purchase and sale agreement, it is a requirement that the seller provide you with any and all due diligence materials that they have. Well, we got up on the roof and inspected it, and the report came back that there was some damage to the roof that might be covered under warranty. Well, that's great, right? Because we, as the incoming buyer, don't need to worry about having to pay for that. So it doesn't need to be in our capital expenditure list. It just needs to be covered under warranty. So we asked the seller to have the warranty crew come out and inspect the property and provide us with a copy of the warranty. Well, they just kept saying, oh, don't worry about it. It's covered under warranty. Y'all don't need to worry about that. It's going to be taken care of, and refused to share it. Well, I don't know about you guys, but I'm not just going to take somebody's word that a roof is covered under warranty and that the damage that is currently on the roof, which is the current sellers, the current owners' issues, are going to just magically get resolved after my client buys it. Big red flag. So I'm sure at this point you guys are starting to see red flag after red flag after red flag. None of these on their own would have necessarily been a deal killer, but all of those combined, we just got spooked. And buying commercial real estate is as much of a psychological game as it is a numbers game or just a logical game, right? I mean, if we can't get comfortable and we don't feel good about buying a property, why would we move forward and take the risk? This is a $2.9 million asset. It's not like we're just buying a cheeseburger. I need to know exactly what we are buying and getting ourselves into. So as a broker, I don't make commissions unless a deal closes, right? Most brokers don't. That's just kind of how the deal is structured. But I'm also doing this for the long term. I can't have a client getting into a bad deal and then looking at me and going, this is your fault. How come you didn't help us? Or how come you didn't advise us the right way? So I advised them. I started telling them, kind of after the first few red flags, we might want to consider moving on from this. I know that, we've spent some money on legal fees. We've spent money on inspections. It's never fun to walk away from those costs, but sometimes, again, it's necessary. I would rather spend $2, $4, $5,000 and walk away from a property than buy it and have to spend $50,000 on a roof and get into one of the tenant spaces and realize that, they've ripped out all the walls and there's a hole in the floor, right? Like, that's just, it's going to be so much of a burden. And that's not the point of a triple net or single tenant net lease asset, right? We're buying these as a relatively passive investment. So something to keep in mind. This didn't happen on this deal, but it has happened frequently in other deals. Too many lease discrepancies, too many rent roll discrepancies. The the sellers will be able to provide cash flow statements on the property, how much rent they've been collecting every month. And then you'll go back and basically do your own audit of the financials and compare that to the lease to see what the tenants are supposed to be paying, and compare it to the rent roll of what the landlord is claiming the tenants are paying every month. It's one thing for a lease to be off by 3 to 5%, or maybe they've just never, increased the rent even though they were supposed to in the lease. You'll see things like that occasionally, especially with the less sophisticated owners. Maybe they don't have property managers really inspecting all of that for them. But to have almost every single lease have an issue with that's very concerning to me. I've only had this happen a couple of times in my career, but we ended up having to, this was on some bigger shopping centers with 30 plus tenants. We ended up having to extend due diligence by 30 to 60 days or more so that we could make sure that we understood what leases we were buying, because some of the leases had pages missing. Some of them were scanned in upside down. Some had addendums that were not present in the lease copy that we were given, and some of them referenced other documents that we didn't have. So you can imagine, as a buyer, if there is not absolute security in that lease, you have no idea what you're buying. So that's a big red flag. Make sure that you are checking for that. There are so many other reasons to walk away from a deal. It's not something that we like to do. It's not something that I ever want to do, especially after spending money, especially on my front, right? I've done that before. We've walked away from deals. I like to tell sellers that when I'm buying their property and I put it under contract, I am not going to walk away from it unless there's something that comes up that they won't work with me on, or that none of us could have possibly expected. I think that's only ever happened one time in my 9-year career thus far. It's only happened one time. And it's because we had a seller that wouldn't work with us on something that also probably should have disclosed something that they didn't, right? Because you want a reputation as a commercial real estate investor that when you put a property under contract, you're closing. It's always nice to be able to genuinely say that to every seller you come across. Look, if I put this property under contract, I'm closing, And unfortunately on this deal, the seller was just unreasonable. The broker was relatively inexperienced. He was a much younger broker. Hopefully it was a good learning experience for him just to see, one, the process of making sure that anything scheduled goes smoothly, but two, handling client expectations. The fact that they weren't willing to even budge on a 2-day due diligence period meant to us, if this roof comes back and it's not covered under warranty and it is a $50,000 charge, the seller won't even work with us to give a $50,000 discount. At least that was our perception. And I think that that's a pretty fair conclusion to come to. So in the end, we ended up having to walk away. And that's not the worst thing in the world, because, now we're looking at other assets and we'll find something here pretty soon. But those are some reasons for when you should walk away from a commercial real estate investment. Even though you've spent money, count it as a sunk cost and move on to the next one. There's always another deal that is not the one that you have under contract is not the best deal in the world. There's always going to be other deals out there. That's the great thing about real estate, is that there is a ton of it out there. So, as I said, guys, we go live on Tuesdays. Feel free to check the YouTube channel for pre-scheduled live streams. And other than that, we will see y'all next time. Thank you for listening to the Commercial Real Estate Investor Podcast, brought to you by Hamilton, your resource for passive real estate investment opportunities. Visit www.investwithhamilton.com to start building your passive real estate portfolio today.